Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Committee of the Whole meeting. Patty, can you take the roll call, please?
Espino, Lang,
Present.
Mancia,
Present.
Patriarch present, Reed,
Present.
Sager,
Present.
and Schumacher.
Okay, before I say the Pledge of Allegiance, just a quick reminder, make sure you leave your mics on and talk loudly into it so we can all hear it. All right, Pledge of Allegiance, please. Item 4.0 is committees, comments and suggestions from the public. Since we have no public here, we will be moving on to discussion items of the strategic plan. Dr. Bresnan, the floor is yours.
All right, good evening, everyone. We are going to go right into our presentation for the strategic plan. So we are very excited to have our SLT team here tonight, as well as two members from our board who serve on our strategic planning committee, to provide an update on the district's strategic plan, which began back in 2019, I believe. So we are excited to be here tonight to really talk about where we are today and where we will be going into the future. So just as a reminder from the past, what was already accomplished, taking voice from our community members, from staff, from administration, from our board, to really work collectively to establish our mission, our vision, and establish our core values. So when we look at that, that really is the foundation that guides our work. And then as we head into the actual goal areas, what we wanted to do was really take the work from 2019, and I know we had somewhat of a pause due to the pandemic and the circumstances of the world, but really to dive back in and to start to operationalize the plan. So what you see in front of you are the 4 goal areas that were established as part of the original work. And underneath each of the 4 goal areas are the high-level strategies, which were also already established as part of the original work. What we have done through the work of the Strategic Planning Committee, including Dr. Sager and Courtney as well, and our SLT membership, is to really take those goals and take those high-level strategies and start to apply our key performance indicators. So when we read through this, and we'll go through each of our goal areas tonight, what we want to be able to envision is at the end of this 5-year plan, as a district, what can we say about District 59? We will be able to describe our district as one that has attacked and achieved each of these goal areas, and that those key performance area indicators will be things that will be accomplished by the end of the 5 years. What we've also done in each of the high-level strategy areas is to establish a color coding kind of metric so that we can really see where we are going to be prioritizing our work throughout the 5 years. So I'm going to go through, you also have a paper copy at your table so you can continue to refer to that. But I want to go through what those 4 color-coded areas mean, because we wanted to ensure that we were all using the same terminology when we were describing how the process looks across each of the goal areas. So one of the goal areas right now is on hold, and that one is in red. And all that means is that there is no new work that is taking place. So obviously, when we look at this plan and we look at the areas, there is work happening every day across the district, across all of these areas. So we really could be orange throughout all of the entire 5 years of this plan. But what we tried to identify was, where are we going to put intentional new work and new focus that really will require input from across the entire district. So the next one is to really go to exploration. And you see a few key areas in year 1 are in exploration, and we have one also in year 2. And that's where we're really researching. We're maybe doing site visits. We may be working with some of our consultants, conducting some of our audits, which we have currently underway. We may be gathering data from focus groups, from different stakeholder members, as well as really trying to collect some data to ask key questions that will hopefully guide us before we get to the in-progress stage. Once we get into the orange, and you'll see there is the bulk of the plan actually lives in the orange, because that means we are doing intentional active work in these areas. So that is where you're going to see allocation of our resources. You are going to see time dedicated to these activities, financial resources dedicated to these activities, time from our staff, perhaps additional personnel to help us achieve in these areas. But also, we're going to be monitoring our progress across those activities and then making adjustments as we need to. So this plan really is a living, breathing document that we will adjust as we collect data, monitor our progress, and continue to refine our work. So the goal then is by the end of the 5 years, and that's the end of the 5th year, not the beginning of the 5th year, but by the end of the 5th year, we will be all in green, meaning that we've implemented all of the targeted strategies, but we're continuing to monitor because our work in education is never done. It's not a checklist and we've accomplished it. We're always reflecting, refining, evaluating, and determining what our next 5 years will look like after that point. So we want a system that's going to be fully functioning. All of those key performance indicators would be accomplished, but we're going to, again, monitor, evaluate, and look for what we can do for future improvements. So with that tonight, we're going to ask the board to reserve any questions, take your notes as we go. And members from our SLT team will be here tonight to walk us through briefly each of the goal areas, what our recommended KPIs are, and then at the end, we will have time for input from our 2 board members who serve on the committee, and then discussion and questions from the board as a whole. So with that, we're going to go into goal number 1, and I will turn it over to Susan.
All right, goal 1, which is student growth and achievement. Promote student growth and achievement through a whole child teaching and learning approach, and we have our strategies to go along with that. Our KPI for our student growth and achievement goal is 80% or more of all students will demonstrate growth and have their learning needs met through the district's universal core curriculum as measured by placing at or above the 20th percentile on benchmark assessments. So the first strategy, readiness, achievement, proficiency, growth, which really entails having a cohesive system to deliver instruction, clarity on what students need to know, and how to respond to their needs. So things that we're going to be looking at this year and certain indicators we might see would be things like our branching mind tiered report, iReady data on growth goals, how we're doing with those typical or stretch goals, as well as even things like lessons passed in the individual pathways. So those are some examples of things that would align well to that first strategy. The second one, curriculum clarity. As you can see, priority focus has been highlighted in blue as the implementation for our math curriculum this year. And really what that means, to differentiate a little bit from the first strategy, is that is that rigorous and relevant curriculum that we are following for our students. And then the math one, obviously being our primary focus. Data indicators we could be looking at this year, along with the indicators from the first strategy, could be some of our illustrative math assessments and how students are doing on those assessments and those standards. Also things related to our implementation, such as teacher self-assessment or walk-through data could be part of that plan as well for indicators.
Okay, moving on to the aligned assessment system process or piece. This year, we're always implementing an assessment system. We've focused on the exploration side of that because we have some new or newer assessments, the IM piece, the iReady piece, especially in a non-COVID year. I shouldn't say that. It's definitely a COVID year. Last year, we only had about 70% of our kids in school. They actually did most of the assessments at home. This year, we're 100% basically of our kids in place and assessing in schools. So we're really exploring the data components to that. What are the standards for high performance? What are the targets we want to set as a district? And we'll really focus on that throughout the year. And also a big piece of this is identifying a data dashboard, a way to communicate out into the community what is important, what our results are, and allow everyone to see our status as a system.
And the final component of Goal 1 is early learning, which is about reaching our birth through 5 learners and extending our reach to promote kindergarten readiness. So this year we're focusing on extending that reach through the use of a parent university at the Early Learning Center and exploration of additional ways to extend that reach. We would measure progress of that through occurrence rates and participation rates in those activities. That moves us into Goal 2, which is the inclusive learning environment. Provide an engaging, personalized, nurturing environment to meet each student's needs and interests. Our key performance indicator over these years will be all students whose needs fall outside the universal core curriculum will achieve expected growth based on their individual measures, or continue with problem solving as documented in the multi-tiered system of support process. Within Goal 2, we have 3 targeted strategies. The first is systems of intervention, enrichment, support, and differentiation. And that strategy reads, meet individual student learning needs through a personalized approach that enables differentiation, intervention, and enrichment. What we will be focused on is choosing additional Tier 3 intervention materials and supporting our interventionists with those materials through professional learning, revising special education evaluation criteria, and recognizing acceleration, enrichment, and talent development within our multi-tiered system of support, and complementing our first goal in terms of our what I need or win structure within MTSS. To measure that progress, we would be looking at the intervention and services documentation and tier level placements complementary to Goal 1's measures and our revised MTSS framework. In the second strategy, we have well-being, social, emotional, and health needs of students and staff. Objectives this year would center around continuing our trauma-informed practices work with professional learning, providing trauma-informed intervention trainings for our student services team, and our focus on culturally responsive classroom management. We are also going to be looking at junior high social-emotional learning refinement. So our measures for Goal 2 in terms of well-being, social-emotional, and health needs would be student and staff survey results, such as our panorama results, and professional learning completion rates.
Okay, so the last piece under goal number 2 is the ownership, engagement, voice, and choice. And that's really where we're providing shared opportunities for students, families, and staff to contribute their voice and ownership to the district's work and direction. So we're really in the exploration phase this year as we try to target some key identified ways on how we can engage staff and various stakeholder groups. One example is how we've framed our curriculum resource committee and how we combine that kind of with our board as well as with our parents. So looking for some ways that meet the needs of our families and meet them where they're at, but engage them in the process. So we'll be looking to identify some key targeted ways to do that this year. Okay, goal number 3 is family and community partnerships. And this is where we support partnerships through communication, collaboration, trust, and respect to advocate for student success. So the KPI that we've designed for family and community partnerships is really more of not so much a statistical, quantitative piece, but looking at all families will have enhanced opportunities to partner with the district and community organizations to support student growth and learning through leveled communication strategies, number of career exploration activities offered prior to high school, and two-way communication opportunities. So this is really putting opportunities out there and then monitoring how effective they are, because again, all of our goals are really designed to help all students achieve success. So these are some of the areas that we're going to focus in on in developing those partnerships. The three areas here, and Ben Gray isn't able to be with us here tonight, but I'm representing his work as well as one of our Goal 3 champions. But we have partnerships with families, again, in that exploration phase, as we really identify what are the needs of our families, what are the best ways to engage them. And then partnerships with the community. And this one is really unique because it's not just about working with community organizations. It's actually about creating opportunities for students to engage with the community as it is reflective in their own goals and academic needs. So that's an exciting one that we'll be looking at. It's on hold right now, but definitely something as we do some career exploration in year 2 to begin to look at how those partnerships might take place. And then the last one, we're really, this is a key targeted area, and we want to explore what are we currently doing in terms of that two-way communication and collaboration. What is working? What is not working? And how can we refine our process to better find out how we need to communicate and engage families so that we can receive information in that partnership as well as distribute information that's important for our community. Goal number 4, I will turn over to Ron and Ross.
Thank you, Dr. Brzan. So goal 4 refers to the stewardship of resources in terms of aligning human, financial, and physical resources to ensure integrity and equity in resource planning and allocation.
And much like goal 3, the KPI reaches into a number of departments. Stakeholders can expect district resources will be utilized in a manner that ensures integrity and equity in resource planning and allocation, as demonstrated through a continuous review and decision-making process. The 3 objectives include, or strategies rather, are equity across schools, high-quality staff, fiscal stewardship, and Dr. Bresnahan will speak to the equity across schools.
Sure, so you see that we have our second highlighted blue area, which is the equity work. And the board is very actively aware of the work that we are currently undergoing. We're really looking at this as part of our exploration phase. We're in the process of conducting that audit and really establishing a baseline of data so that then we can further explore what is that data telling us? Where are we in terms of the areas where we can improve in terms of equity and really focus our work so that hopefully by the end of the 5 years, we can really say that we have applied an equity lens across all areas of work that we do here in District 59.
For high-quality staff, the district has always and wants to continue attracting and hiring high-quality, culturally diverse staff. The objectives to accomplish this will include development, retaining, and celebrating staff, and we'll measure this through the quantity, quality, and the diversity of our new partnerships and pipelines for finding staff members and training them, as well as our hiring rates, retention rates, and performance rates.
As for fiscal stewardship, it's a focus for the business office. Currently, we have identified this piece as in progress due to the many ideas we have in communicating our fiscal strength and efficiency. So evaluating the fund balance per board policy, reviewing expenses per pupil in each building with exceptions tracked, providing expenses per program with anomalies explained due to the cost of programming, implementing a 5-year financial outlook to plan for future revenues and expenses, and of course, implementing the 10-year facilities plan for building upkeep, updated every 6 months.
Okay, so that was a very broad, high-level overview of the plan, and our hope tonight is that the board and our community walks away from this meeting really understanding the high-level operationalizing of this plan. So the day-to-day work, that's what we all do, and the information that was shared tonight is representative of every school, teacher, stakeholder group, because they are an integral part of us accomplishing our goals. So that's kind of the day-to-day purview of the administrative team. And we have a separate document with all of these things that they spoke about listed in detail for the entire year. It is a pretty extensive document. And those are all the things that we're going to be reporting out on a regular basis, at least annually at a high level, but really throughout the year when you see all of our presentations, you're going to see the data shared that they spoke to tonight. So that's kind of the purview of the board, is to ensure that we are really on track to achieve the goals that have been established. And then looking at where we're going to go next is we want to figure out what metrics and measures are we going to use. You heard several examples shared tonight of the things that we want to present to the board and to the community for transparency, as well as to inform our own work. And that's really going to come out in a data dashboard that's kind of step one this year, that we want to create a dashboard that's going to have all of these key metrics and indicators. So throughout the year, we're going to be able to visit that and see where are we falling in terms of each of the areas that we are actively, intentionally monitoring. And then we will do at least an annual review so that we can maintain, like we said, that living, breathing document and the flexibility. Because at the end of the year one, we're going to have a better idea of where we were we pacing ourselves correctly, were we targeting the right things, are there any other changes to the district that have come up that might take us into a different priority, and really being able to look at that and then plan ahead for year two and so on and so forth. So those are kind of our next steps and the high level piece of where we are with the plan. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Lang and Dr. Sager for their input and anything additional they would like to add.
So I appreciate all of the background and everything that you covered. I think that from my perspective, the keys for me as a board member is having this like multi-layered understanding of what's going on. I guess this being the highest level, the dashboard, so we know all the way out to 5 years where we are in these different priorities. And as Terry mentioned, there's documents on the implementation side that take that deeper. So one piece that at our last meeting we wanted to hone in on is making sure that in addition to the dashboard, we had the blue items, the priority foci, I guess you would say. In the past, I think that's sort of how annually we had like the priority items, and there was usually one for each category. But to me personally, I liked this more holistic look where we're not just seeing 1 year, we're seeing 5 years, and these priorities year over year are going to shift depending where we are as we move along the timeline. I think the key piece for me as well that I am excited to see are how we define these KPIs, right? How do we get from the in progress to the implemented with monitoring? So, you know, Joe and I have had several conversations with this group about how some of these elements do lend themselves to numeric evaluation. They're quantitative. Others are more qualitative. Are we having effective communication? So trying to determine, and I think that's important for this board to decide, like, what are those key indicators that tell us, yes, we've achieved this, and being able to collaborate with the SLT to get on the same page about what makes sense for you operationally and what would give us confidence we've got there, right? So personally, one of the ones that made a lot of sense to me, just taking curriculum as an example, because it does fit that quantitative category somewhat, is we talked about this at the last board meeting. In the student growth, we want our kids, 80% of them, to be able to fall within that core curriculum. And the question was raised at the last board meeting, well, why 80%? Why wouldn't we want 100%? And I've only learned this from being on the board and my exposure to education in this area, that MTSS processes are designed with an understanding that for any given group of students, 80% is that core group you expect to fall in sort of your bell curve average, and then you're gonna have outliers on either side. So I like the way one of those KPIs is, are our students falling into that 80% with the core curriculum? And I think that was further enhanced by the 25% level. So personally, I like that because we mathematically would be able to look and say, okay, how close are we? Do we have 70% of students falling in? Do we have, 70% out of 15%? How much more do we need to get there? So I think the more that we can develop those specific KPIs that undergird this, I see that as helping both sides to define our goals, work towards our goals, figure out where the gaps are. So I'll let Joe take it over.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Ling. From the strategic planning committee side of things, we were shown not just this document, but there's an entire checklist that the SLT has that goes with every single one of these. And every single one of these is perhaps dozens of individual targets that they're working on. And I don't want to speak for you, but as for myself, I thought that was too much information for the board. It was going to just sort of fly over everybody's head. It was very, very detailed stuff that obviously the SLT team needs to monitor their progress and have their to-do list, essentially. And my concern then was, we're going to wind up with all the in-progress stuff at once, and things are just going to sit in progress for several years at a time. So I think to get around that sort of level of detail, we've got this strategic plan that shows, 5 years, here's the things we're focusing on every year. But we're also interested in building this data dashboard, this higher level set of numbers, right? If the strategic plan is working, as we think it will, and we're following through on our goals, we expect growth in these things. So as you said, the one example is 80% will fit within this certain area. And at least for myself, I didn't want to then say, we've decided it's these, right? We wanted to come to the whole board at this meeting and give you all a chance to sort of, what do you want to see? And then there was also the question of then the reporting structure, right? So every year, what data do we want to see every 4 months or so, right? Reported out to the board. Where do we want to see updates on these information? Because just seeing it says in progress one year and says in progress the next year isn't necessarily useful at a high level, but it would be nice to say, we get a report once a year or twice a year on each of these, but number one we see every 4 months or something like that, right? So what is the high level goals we want to see reported back to us? I think that's the purpose of this meeting, right? Is we want to get an idea for what we want to look at. And I do like the more numeric things, but again, I'm as a guy who loves data, right, there are some things that are just not going to fall into data, but maybe they're some, we get a report that's we did this, and so there's still some update from the SLT team. I really like the 80% goal because we're going to be able to do a baseline measurement this year at the start of our strategic plan. And then as we do math implementation, as we do literacy stuff later, maybe we'll see hopefully progress rather than just it happened or it didn't sort of outputs. So I think I don't know where you're going to go next, Dr. Brejnahan.
No, I think that was great. And I want to thank both Joe and Courtney because I think they really helped our team process where we were going and how to separate out the detailed level day-to-day plan versus this high-level plan that really is for the public's consumption. And then I think tonight what I'd really like to walk away with is feedback on these specific KPIs so that then we can take these and start to draft what are those metrics that are going to go in here and be part of the dashboard for that regular monitoring and reporting out. Because the way I read this is that at the end of 5 years, District 59 will be a district where 80% or more of our students have their needs met through the core curriculum. All students who do not have their needs met will engage in our personalized learning plans in order to have their needs met. We will have enhanced opportunities and partnerships through communication, and we will be a district where we can know that we've expended our resources and our personnel planning in a way that reflects equity. That, to me, summarizes where we will be at the end of 5 years. And it's going to be those metrics that we want to report out just to gauge where are we on that path to be that district that you have identified is what the community values and wants.
So to clarify then, for example, goal 4, stewardship of resources, we need to develop what the KPIs are going to be for high quality staff for fiscal stewardship. Is that what we need to develop?
So I think what would actually be more meaningful is that if you look at what give us feedback on the existing KPI for the overall goal, the specific measures within each one of those is what then we will present to you throughout the year, and we can land. So for example, when Ross said, we're gonna look at our retention data, we're gonna look at the diversity of our candidates, we're gonna look at our hiring numbers each year, those are the metrics that we will then share out, and that will help us gauge where we fall within that KPI for goal number 4. And then those would become part of our dashboard. So we don't have those specifics ready yet, but it's the conversation of what we want to anticipate to provide to you. But I think we worked pretty diligently to refine these goal KPIs by goal, so that, does that resonate with you? Does that seem like when these goals were drafted, do those statements reflect back to you what your intent was?
To me, it's like, when I was teaching, it would be, the parents would always ask, how's my child doing? And to me, it's like, their grade is gonna be in flux. All year, it's gonna be in flux. My main goal is where are they gonna be at the end? But to me, these things that we're gonna decide on is, those are the things that are gonna go up and down, and it's getting to the end of the 5 years. That is what I think most everybody wants to see, and how are we doing getting there? But I think people need to understand that we're gonna be going up and down. It's not gonna be a straight across, it's not gonna be, oh, we're gonna shoot right up. It's gonna be in flux, and what you wanna see is how it's getting towards that end that we wanna see. So, I'm interested, like the 80% is a really good example, because that to me, I can look at that, at the end of that 5 years, did we get there? Now we gotta do it for the rest of them.
So does the 80% include our special ed students?
So when we say 80%, we're saying 80% of all students. So knowing that there's going to be outliers in that 20% that may need additional supports beyond the core curriculum in order to have their needs met and to be successful.
I guess my point is, though, how are we going to count the ESL and the special ed and so forth? Because they can't be expected to perform at the same standards of the other regular students.
So I might challenge you on that one, Mardell, because I think what we need to do is look at the individual students. And a specific indicator about a student does not exclude them from achieving those expectations. It's what supports do we need to put in place in order for them to achieve. And that's where we differentiate. That's why we have the MTSS process. So when we look at the overall goal, we want to meet the needs of 100% of our students. 80% we're hoping are going to be through our core curriculum. 20% are going to need more or something different, perhaps.
Okay.
Katie, do you want to add anything additional to that?
Because it also includes, in special ed, that includes the TDP kids, those higher achievers. They're going to be an outlier as well. I mean, that's what our hope is.
Well, let me, maybe I'm peeling the onion too much. So goal 1, 80%, that's the number that we're talking about. Goal 2 is the 20% that fall outside that 80%, right? So if we're thinking of KPIs for goal 2, can we set a number for that 20%, of 80% of the 20%? You know what I mean? How do we gauge the success for that goal?
See, I would like to think is that obviously the MTSS process is going to be individualized for each student. They're going to have a growth goal. So my thinking is, I wonder if you can somehow tie like that floor of the 25th percentile of their goal, like they're at least achieving, and I don't know how you came up with that 25th percentile, if it's analogous, but that they're either achieving their growth goal or 25% of proficiency, whatever that number is intended to reflect, that it would then also be paralleled in the 20%. But I defer to the experts on whether that makes sense.
So something to consider with goal 2 is that anyone who falls outside of their needs being met by the core would be scooped up by goal 2, right, in that individualized learning path. So if we have 79% of students whose needs are met by the core, then goal 2 is going to account for the 21%, right? So goal 2 is going to fluctuate with goal 1 and how many students are having their needs met by the core versus needing intervention or services. So really the way that it's written right now is to have anyone whose needs fall outside, regardless of what the number is, ensure that their needs are met through an individualized and personalized learning plan. What I anticipate that we would be measuring is how they're progressing in their personalized plan. So
Yeah, I think that's,
every student whose needs fall outside of the core should have personalized goals for intervention or services. And part of our work is to incorporate acceleration, enrichment, and TDP in that process for a personalized plan as well. So at the end of the 5 years, we can say confidently that anyone who's falling on either end of that 80% is having that personalized goal met, and they're making progress towards their own goal. So it's difficult to put a percentage on that because each goal will be individual, but we can say that the inverse of the goal 1 students will be the goal 2 students, if that makes sense.
So can I mention, NSSEO, their students, rather than having something like the 80 percentile, meeting 25 percentile, they have a certain percentage of the students will show, have met their growth targets in their IEP, right? And so you can have something like that, right? Because it shows two things. It shows that we're getting the growth that we hope for, and we're designing the IEPs correctly for our students.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'd just like to draw your attention to the details of how this KPI is written, because it said the first part of that KPI is all students whose needs fall outside of the universal core, so we're talking 20% or whatever that percentage is, will achieve expected growth based on their individual measures. So that specifically addresses exactly what you just said. So now we're looking at their individualized growth as opposed to what we're seeing, what we're qualifying for goal number 1. I think the second point that I would like to make is that, you know, all of the goals, 2, 3, and 4, and 1, all are designed to help support that 80%. So when we have parents as partners, when we address things in an equitable way, when we properly allocate our resources and have high quality staff and retain them, that all as a system is going to help us achieve that. So while we may not have specific percentiles or numbers attached to 2, 3, or 4, know that those qualitative pieces are designed. So if we look at goal number 1 and we're not hitting it, we're gonna have to look at goal 2, what's happening. We're gonna have to look at goal 3, what's happening. We're gonna have to look at goal 4, what's happening, to adjust so that we can ultimately hit that overarching piece for student achievement.
Now, you say individual, each student's gonna have their individual goals. When I think back on goals, I think, when they sit and they set their goals, is that like their individual goals that they want to achieve? Is that like a starting point for them for how we're gonna achieve that? Does that make sense?
Do you mean the students setting their
Right,
own
the
goals?
Students setting their goals.
So that student would be part of that goal setting process, but really we would be looking at how has the child responded to the core instruction? What are the specific learning needs that they have, and then setting a goal together for the skill set that the child needs to develop or accelerate on, that would get them closer to participating in core curriculum. So really that is either an academic or a behavioral skill written into a goal for that student.
And is that semester or quarterly, Katie?
That's as often as needed.
Oh, okay.
Yep, so if students are moving quickly through their goals, we're setting a new one. And if they're taking longer, then we're adjusting and modifying our instruction to meet those needs.
I guess the way I look at it is the goals, the mission, the vision and so forth don't really change. They've been the same as long as they've been on the board, basically. I mean, we keep doing a strategic plan, coming up with new goals, but if you look at the new ones and comparing to the old, they're pretty much the same. What's important is how we go about and improving on what we've got toward these goals. Now, one of the things that we were inundated with this past year was, in year and a half, 2 years before you arrived, Terry, was the public coming and complaining that our students were not doing well on the state tests. Something which was anathema to our district because we always were top of the barrel. The reason being that some of our students couldn't speak English or write the questions in English because they still had not learned English. So that's one of the places where I think, one of the processes where we're going to have to look at it more carefully and see what is the best way to make sure that our English language learners are learning English, because otherwise they will keep failing on the state tests. And that's not something that the community is going to be happy about. So I'm happy to see that you've got a 5-year plan. I think that's excellent, because we always have had wonderful goals, et cetera, but we didn't have any particular plan like this. I think it's great, but I think we've got to be sure at each year as we go along to look and make sure that we have accomplished something during that year before we move on to the next one, because otherwise we'll end up the same place at the end of 5 years that we are now.
Absolutely. I think the need for the dashboard and those metrics is going to be what ties this plan together year to year to inform us, because a plan looks really pretty on paper, but unless we actually put it into action, it doesn't mean much.
And I
So
think specifically on our highlighted equity audit, we are going to be looking at disaggregation, right? We're going to be looking at different groups of students to make sure that it's not 80% of students, but we're leaving certain groups behind, right? So I think that piece will speak to it. So I think what we're getting from Mardell, you want to see disaggregation, right? You want to make sure that we're seeing this growth across all groups. And so
Right.
we want to make sure there's some sort of key performance indicator that gives us that. So when you're reporting to us, we want to see that.
And the reporting and the dashboards, that's going to be for us and for everyone, right? It'll be publicly available and they'll be able to understand it. And I think that goes down too with like the communication piece of things, because if I am a parent, I would look at goal number 3 and the KPI for goal number 3, and I would think, why aren't they doing that? You know what I mean? Like, it seems like it should be something that should be done, you know? So I think it's just more of that communication piece of what are we strengthening and what differences you will see going forward in these years versus, you know, because a parent will think, you know, why are they not doing these things already? You know, I think that.
And you know, Robert, that's a great point, because I think what's difficult is that all of these things are happening to some extent in all of our schools. And that's something to absolutely celebrate. So it really is building upon what we have, and I think really then intentionally targeting where are our gaps. I think that's really where we are in terms of this plan, as opposed to, you know, we're not starting from square one.
Yeah.
We're starting from a really good place in District 59. I hope the board and our SL team know that we are starting from a really great place. It's shoring some things up and ensuring that we don't have gaps. And that's why that equity piece is so foundational, because that's going to help us address why aren't we seeing the outcomes that we've wanted to see in years past. And if we don't dig into the data through that lens, we're never going to know. And we're going to keep trying things that aren't going to work.
Yeah.
So I absolutely hear you. I think it's to be celebrated that we have so much progress in all of these areas. It's now taking it to that next level and then reporting out on how is that impacting us as a district.
Yeah,
How is
'cause-
our investment in these resources giving us a return on that?
Yeah, yeah, because a lot of times it's taking the KPI and flipping it around and asking I'll go back to goal number 3 again. You know, all families will have enhanced opportunities, et cetera. You know, asking the question of what is stopping us right now from having all families doing that and then writing that down and then, you know, breaking it down piece by piece as to what is that barrier that is preventing us from doing all of these things right now, identifying them and addressing them.
And that other document that Joe referred to, that's where the details come
sure.
out of actually targeting. How do we know which, because we explicitly use the word all families. Because right now, not all families have that opportunity.
Right.
And so that is the work. Where are those gaps? Where are those families that aren't having the opportunities? And now how do we really put in that work strategically to find out who they are, why don't they have those opportunities, and what different opportunities might we need to provide in order to better engage them?
And I think what Robert has said is good. The board needs to know all these things, because I was floored when I heard, when I reported at the last meeting, that two of our junior highs, Grove and Friendship, don't even have the same curriculum. Now, this isn't your problem because you're new, but the point is, we never knew that. We had no idea that they had different curriculums. And I still don't know why, and I don't know if it's going to continue, and I think that's something we all want to know, or at least I certainly do.
And Mardell, this is a big piece that Joe and I really encourage Dr. Bresnahan and the SLT in these meetings, is that we want to shy away from only celebrating the things that we're doing right and only saying like, oh, we hit this number, and really, as a board, we want transparency about the growth areas and the areas that are uncovered that need to be fixed, because we all recognize that no system's going to be perfect, and we can only address the problem if we're aware of the problem. So just reiterating that for the board, that when we think about this dashboard, we want to be clear and transparent about what our growth areas and areas for improvement are.
Well, we have to know what's going on, because we're part of the public, and the public talks to us and expects us to know the answers, and if we don't know the answers, we can't help.
Sorry, I've been kind of quiet because I've just been kind of taking this all in. I really like this, and I like the aggressiveness of this. I mean, it really basically says we're taking a 5-year plan and we're basically going to complete it in 4 years. One thing I'm kind of struggling with is I know we have 2 priority areas of the math implementation and equity audit. We have 4 goals, and I'm almost kind of thinking, do we need to have some sort of, I won't say a priority, but another area that we're going to kind of work on in some of the other goals, to kind of say, here's some things we're going to address in those other goals, because we do have 4 goals that we are working on. And it doesn't have to be anything major, but it's like, hey, this is one thing we're going to kind of maybe spend some time on this year to really work on, like, you know, we're in the exploration. I mean, that's one thing I was going to ask about the color schemes we first discussed about. In exploration, are we going to maybe be doing evaluation of what we're going to do at that point too? So that's, the exploration is more includes the evaluation and then progress.
Yes, the exploration is intended to guide us before we take action on something, to know what we're going to take action on and why.
Okay, so
Yeah.
that evaluation of different, you know,
Yeah.
different methodologies and stuff like that. So I don't know how we can put more on the staff already this year. 'Cause
Well,
gosh,
I will,
yeah, and
so
that
I will
makes that
say that there is plenty of work. Like, I could throw like 5 more blue bars up here, because this work is going. I mean, there is targeted work in all of these areas. I think the 2 highlighted areas that we really wanted to focus in on, when we met with our building principals and we went through their goal-setting process, Mr. Ludloff and I did that the past couple weeks. We asked principals to set no more than 3 goals, and every principal was tightly aligned with their building goals, encouraged their teachers to set goals in these areas. They all had one around our math implementation, they all had one around our equity work, and then a professional goal for themselves as a building leader. And so the tightness, it's not that we're not going to achieve and progress in these other areas, it's that we are going to see substantial movement because we have really clear, tight, articulated alignment across these 2 areas. So we can absolutely put a blue in goal 2 and a blue in goal 3. Just know that it's almost like maybe a different color blue or something. Because it is like, I mean, those are 2 areas. And again, I really want to advocate on behalf, because it's this, when I would still say 80 of our time is spent on COVID-related matters. So
maybe-
I don't want to tell the board that we can like
No. And I-
hit things that we're not going to hit when
Yeah.
it is like on max capacity right now in
Randy,
terms of
can
those
I give you,
things.
can I give you a little bit of background? So when Courtney and I first saw this, everything was in progress. And we had to push back and say, you are not, the SLT is not doing everything this year.
Yeah.
And so I think by putting too many focus areas, we're not being realistic about what people are spending their time on.
And I think my question goes back to, the question you said, we didn't share the in-depth thing.
Right.
So it's hard for me to kind of see what else is also being done. So that's why I'm kind of struggling with that. So I think maybe that's a question, can we get that shared with us so we can see those things? So
Yeah.
just so I can kind of see the stuff that's being in there, just so I can kind of know that, hey, we are doing stuff.
So I would say your weekly reports that you see are the evidence that tie directly to that. I want to be a little protective of my team because I told them that I would be. That this is really like, I mean, it is our day-to-day kind of guiding us year to year. It's not something that, it's absolutely, we can have conversations with the board, but it does get to a deeper level of some day-to-day operations that I'm going to be a little protective of. But I will say, what we have talked about as a team, every time we present, we are going to say, as part of goal number 3, we're reporting out onto you and our update around, we're going to have in October, we're going to be talking about data. So we're going to hit goal number 1 and goal number 2 in our presentation in October. And we're going to explicitly talk about that. So you're going to see this plan in real life every time we meet. I think that's maybe a missing component that you haven't had. It's going to take a little trust that we're going to tie that together for you so that you're not going to have to see some big, long, 4-page spreadsheet to know that this work is active and living
Yeah.
and ongoing.
But I
That's
think-
my hope.
I think without putting like a highlighted into number 2, like Randy, we know that number 1 is the 80%, number 2 is the 20% that fall, that are the
Yeah,
outliers.
The
that-
math is kind of falling into that one,
Yeah,
yeah.
that we don't necessarily have to have like a bar that is emboldened,
Yeah.
because we know those two complement each other. But maybe, you're right, maybe something that kind of like, okay, number 3,
Yeah.
how does that fit in? But I
Yeah.
think the first 2, because they complement each other and they do reinforce what's being done, those 2 are are taken care of.
And maybe we just say that, so as Terry pointed out, we're having the data update that covers 1 and 2. Maybe we agree that at a certain point in the year, we have an update on those exploration items in goal 3, so that we understand, okay, what are you exploring in partnering with families? But I do tend to support just having, and I think Joe and I obviously have the benefit of the back conversations, but I do support the idea of honing this down to core goals, because I think the better we can hit those, as Terry's pointed out, they feed up into the top. And so, small check-ins on the other pieces, but I don't want to give them the priority that we gave 1 and 4.
No, I'm not disagreeing with the priorities are 1 and 4.
And Terry, as years go by, we expect the blue bars to move around, right? So
Yeah.
this is
Oh,
our
yeah.
current focus, and then, once we hit a certain point in progress with the math curriculum, it's going to jump to something else, right? And
Right.
so those focuses are going to be moving around.
Am I correct in believing that right now, we have our big emphasis on academics with math? We're trying to get this done. But obviously, we're not going to wait 5 years to start working on the literacy or the science. So when we decide to start with the literacy or science or social science, whatever it is, will we add it to this list so we know what year we're starting on different things? Good, because that
Absolutely.
keeps us up to date then. So we,
That goes back to Susan's presentation from 2 weeks ago. It's a discussion of the whole curriculum and the evaluation, the
Good.
whole process.
so this will be a living document
Yes.
as we go along.
Yeah, we saw, Susan did the whole breakdown of what's gonna be focused and what the timeline is for those. And we saw that in the curriculum meeting with the parents.
But I'm saying, will it be, is that what is going to be on here?
Yeah, we'll see those shifts in the priority focus because the KPI for goal number 1, when we say universal core, we mean all academic content. So by the end of year 5, we will have all of our content areas in that place. That's our goal. So it's going to shift from math. We're already beginning the foundational pieces for our literacy work. So yes, all of those things will be coming, and then we'll add those. I almost, just for the sake of this year, I almost would put a goal 5 and make it, I don't know, the brightest blue, because it's about building relationships and keeping schools open.
When you
And
think
that's,
about it,
right, if we can do that plus these two things, we will have had a really successful school year.
when you think about it, 5 years, that takes your first graders all the way to your 5th grade. They're through with elementary school and moving into the junior high. So you've got to start earlier and get it done, because otherwise they're left out.
So can I ask about the first key performance indicator? It's really several key performance indicators, right? So when we build out our dashboard, we expect to see math, literacy, science, right? The normal things that we see reported out from like the school report cards, that sort of thing, right? So seen through this lens of 80% goal, right? Is that correct? So
Absolutely.
This is a single number.
It is going to be, and then we're going to see it by subgroups and demographic groups. We're going to see it across content areas. We're going to have multiple measures across our assessment performance. We're going to look at our local benchmark data as well as our high-level, state testing data, when that is something that we can be reliant upon. It is going to be multiple measures that inform us to tell us whether or not we're hitting goal number 1.
I would say in this first year, it will be focused mostly on math and literacy. That science piece is an exploration, and I think social science will come after that, but at least in this initial piece. Yeah, the data we'll be able to report about math and literacy across the board.
Is that because iReady is the greatest input to this?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
And then my only other question here was, it says, as measured by placing at or above the 25th percentile benchmark assessments, doesn't that automatically assume that the one side of the bell curve is hitting their goals, even though we sort of were implying that TDP students, so how do we identify those students, right? Because they'll be hitting their 25th percentile, but how do we identify that they're not being met by the core?
So that 25th, the 25th to the 75th percentile, we would call average. That's the average range. Below, that's where we really jump into goal 2 and tier 2 and 3. Above that, that's that 75th and beyond, that's above. That's where I think we might focus for some of those kids. We haven't had deep discussions regarding that piece. The other piece that'll really inform this, specific to the iReady piece, is kids, we're able to measure kids making typical progress or hitting their stretch goals. So we'll also be able to look within those parameters at kids and percentages and how they're doing on that path.
Right. So do we need then
An upper
bound
threshold.
on that, right? So
I think
because if you think of a distribution of scores, some of
Right.
the students are at the lower end, some of the students are at the higher end, and we expect our core to be the middle group. And how do we collect that top group?
I hear what you're saying. I think I would need to do a little bit more investigating on our measures that we use to identify students at that level. And maybe we could have some of those conversations and see where that would fall in order to determine how their needs get met outside the core.
Right. So, I mean, we'd be happy with 20% TDP students.
Right.
Right? So,
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I'm just trying
Yes,
to balance
no,
the
I
two
think that's a
ideas,
good point.
right?
But wouldn't we still go, old tried and true, teacher recommendation, because they see the day-to-day with the kids, their grades and their test scores? Because even if they don't do really well on tests, Joe, then they could always be, the teacher sees what those scores don't see.
Right, and we're using branching minds, is that?
Branching minds is the data holder.
Right.
In order to
But
aggregate the
does
data.
that take into account teacher input? I don't know if we've ever gone into detail into what exactly goes into it. I know the iReady scores go into it. What else?
So Branching Minds collects all of our assessment data for students, and so it also incorporates attendance data, it has discipline data, so it helps us to look at a child in a more well-rounded way. One of the targeted strategies for goal 2 for this year is exploration of acceleration, enrichment, and TDP for exactly this purpose. Because it is we have programs that we offer, we have options that we offer, but we have not yet systemically included that in our multi-tiered system of support. And so that's one of the items that we will be exploring this year and researching in terms of what is our philosophy of inclusion of acceleration, enrichment, and TDP within our multi-tiered system of support. How are those decisions made and how is that documented and responded to regularly within our system?
Is there, you're saying the teacher input?
Yes, so we would always make programmatic changes for students based on multiple data points. We wouldn't just say because of this one score or because of this one grade or because of one teacher's input. We would say, let's look at all of these things collectively and determine if that is the best instructional route for that child. And that's why that's identified as one of our objectives for this year, because we know that in order to be able to meet that 5-year KPI, we have got to incorporate that within our system in a much stronger and more stable way.
So, one thing, when you start talking about the different assessments, we talked about benchwork assessments. We're going to have, it's going to be consistent, right? Every year we have, K through 2 are going to be evaluated based on this assessment for reading, this 3 through 5 in this one, 7, 6 through 8, we'll be using this one assessment, that'll be consistent. Do we identify what those actually are gonna be and stuff?
So when we look at a universal assessment system, we want, currently, we've moved to iReady across the board, K to 8, as a universal diagnostic.
For math, correct?
For math and reading. This
Okay.
year, reading was added. I would never want to say we're going to stay with that system forever, because in my time at the district office, we've gone from MAP to FAST, and now we're at iReady. I think it's searching for the most appropriate system. What I really appreciate about iReady, it's a Common Core based system. So it's really about how are kids doing based on grade level Common Core standards. And that's really a priority for the district to see how our kids do in comparison to those standards across the board. Plus, it has growth aspects and even some personalized learning pieces that we really appreciate. So it will be consistent until we say that's not meeting our needs and potentially look at something else. I don't see that happening. I kind of think that 3-year piece, when we talk about math, we're going to stay committed to this and live it and learn it for at least 3 years would be my assumption.
So then I'll ask this question. We get evaluated, our scores that are published out there are based on state results.
Correct.
So is a state maybe some sort of assessment we want to include in that evaluation process, or we feel that the iReady is a better tool?
The iReady piece, what's so appropriate about it, we do that 3 times a year, the diagnostic, so we can see growth over time. I think every school district system also includes state required testing. It just, you report that out after the fact, usually the next year. I mean, we get those results the following summer. They get reported out in October. So it's more of, I think most people like to talk about it as an autopsy.
Yeah,
But the analysis piece, you can compare it to your iReady data to see how predictive it really is or was.
I think the state assessments are a great tool for us to ensure that we're aligned, but I'm not sure that that's the most reliable or timely metric for us to determine whether or not we are
being
achieving
successful.
our goals listed here. I think, we were very intentional about leaving out any specific names of assessments in these because we wanted that flexibility to say how we measure our students and ensuring that they are, appropriate for our students. I think the other piece too is that the state is getting ready to change from IAR in the very near future, and they may be moving to an actual 3-time-a-year assessment. So there's a lot to be seen, and that's why when you look at that aligned assessment system in goal number 1, we're in the exploration phase because we have a lot to learn and assess and really figure that out, what we're going to do and put in place. But whatever those measures are will be, reported out to the board as part of our dashboard.
So I just wanted to note one thing. There's a difference between diagnostics that are used for individual students and our district assessment, right? So you have to think about, we're using the same tool for both, but one of them we're trying to make sure we capture all the experience of all the students.
Yeah, to really inform that 80%. That's a great point. But Because that's their term. They like to use the term diagnostic.
I know, it's a diagnostic tool, but for since we're using it as an assessment, we're really
Universal screener
doing a
is,
universal.
yep, a
testing
universal
of that,
screener
yes.
is probably a more appropriate kind of way to think about it.
And then I had another question was, so we're looking at this 80% as our goal. I don't think we think we're at 80%, right? So we've got students who are behind, right? They're going to fall, a greater than 20% of them are going to fall into goal 2, and we have to catch them up. How do we do that in a timely manner to get them to the point where they're caught up and they then fall into the 80%?
I think first and foremost is that we have to focus in on our universal core and get that really tightly aligned, because that's where the issues are. We can't apply tier 2 or tier 3 until we know that tier 1 is maximized. So that's going to be, I think, the real focus of the work, is to ensure that piece. We can't expect 2 to 3 years worth of growth. We can expect at least 1 year, if not more than that, for some of the stretch goals to try to accelerate that piece. And that's where that, goal number 2 is going to be really important through that process.
And then I just wanted to point out to the other members of the board that we should, when we're getting reports back from the administration, we want to make sure we're looking at consistent data. So whatever is decided on as data that's reported back to us, we always want to see the same thing, because that gives us a chance to see things go the wrong way and act as an early warning system. So I know we're in these transition points where, maybe we're using iReady in the future, maybe we're not, but as a board, we should often push for, we want to see apples to apples things, because that gives us a chance to avoid, I think a lot of us ran for school board because there were issues and they should have been caught. And we need to design a system that can catch them.
I think that key tool is that dashboard. As we settle into that dashboard and that becomes public, there's your system, there's your consistency.
Right, and we expect every year we're going to get 3 reports. They may have different content, but different content areas, but each of the benchmarks is still, we're reporting this, we're reporting that. I know Courtney and I were both concerned, we want to make sure there's a chance to see bad data. And the only way you grow is by seeing bad data. And we want to make sure that we get that as the board, right?
I'd agree.
I think as we prepare for wintertime, when we have the equity audit prepared, that will be our first opportunity to look at some data that's going to give us reason to pause and ask some tough questions and figure out next steps, because that's really at the root of some of the issues that we need to, to your point, Joe, how do we address some of these inequities? We have to make sure our programming is equitably aligned, and then we apply that universal core. That's going to be really critical.
And I think this first year, even though we would like to do way more, we're going to have to do a lot of catching up because of the pandemic. So we're going to have to really work hard and take that into account, because it's an extra problem.
I think most of us okay that we do have, bad numbers now, or, bad news now. I think we're okay with it. We understand that part of it. But I think the key thing we want to see, as everyone has been stressing, is that growth.
Yep.
And as Patty pointed out earlier, hey, we may see growth, we may see a little bump. And that's okay. As long as we see that constant, slowly moving up, we're good with that, because we want to see that consistent growth.
Yeah.
Because we're not going to get it done in a year, but we have, the more growth we can see over time, the better we're going to be. And just working towards that.
Yeah.
So that's why, we're okay. I'm okay with seeing bad numbers.
Yeah.
It happens.
And it's 5 years. It's a 5-year plan. There's going to be some
ups and some downs.
uphill momentum and downhill, but it's not going to do us any good if, we're constantly publishing statuses and patting ourselves on the back saying, look how great of a job we're doing, and that's not the purpose of the exercise, so.
It's not reality.
So next steps for us is that our team is going to take this. We're going to really start assessing where we want those key metrics to come from. We're going to start exploring some of those dashboards so that we have a way to present all of this to you. So that will be the work this year, so that hopefully we hit springtime and we have a really robust platform to start monitoring and guide our work into year 2.
And just one more point, as we develop those dashboard numbers, the board will also have input into those again, right?
Yes, absolutely, because what will be helpful to us is if we give you something that doesn't make sense or that doesn't meet your needs, we need to know that so that we can give you the right pieces of information in the right way, in the right context, so that we can be as transparent as possible. We want to make sure that the needs of the community are met in order to drive this plan forward.
Right, and then we'll also elicit input from other stakeholders, parents, that, I know we did this at the curriculum meeting, asking them what questions they would like to see asked. It'd be nice to do that with this as well. And I mean, partially they do that through us. We get communications from parents, but some other way of asking that.
Absolutely, we can incorporate that into the process. Okay, so with that, I will take us out of our strategic plan. And we have one action item on our agenda tonight for the approval of the 2021 tax levy. So I will open that up.
I'll make the, do you want to do it?
You
Craig?
make,
Go
you make a
ahead.
I can have a motion for the,
I'll make the motion. Be it resolved on the 27th day of September 2021, the Community Consolidated School District 59 Board of Education directs the administration to prepare the 2021 levy. Be it further resolved that the Board of Education conduct a public hearing on the proposed tax levy during the November 8th, 2021 school board meeting, and notification of said hearing be circulated in an area newspaper announcing the public hearing.
Second. Joe.
Joe, is there any seconds or any questions or comments? Okay, roll call, Patty?
Espino? Absent. Lang?
Aye.
Mencia?
Aye.
Petrielli, aye. Reed?
Aye.
Sager?
Aye.
And Schumacher?
Aye.
And the motion passes.
Okay, with that, we're going to be going into closed session to discuss items that are listed in A, B, C, and D. I'd like to thank the SLT for all the hard work they have put into the strategic plan. I know it's like 2 years behind where we wanted to be, but I think we're finally able to make progress towards achieving the goals set forth as part of that large group that had worked on that. And I also want to thank those people that were part of that program, because I know they spent 4 or 5 full days working on that. And it was a lot of hard work to get there, and we want to thank them for getting us to that point, and hopefully they can see the fruits of their labor as this stuff starts coming out. And I want to wish you good luck on the dashboard. With that, we'll be going into closed session, so SLT, have a great night.
Should I make a motion?
Oh yeah, we can make a motion to
I will move that we go into closed session for the discussion of the appointment, employment, or dismissal of an employee or officer under 5 Illinois Statutes 122C1, to consider a student discipline residency transportation matter, 5 Illinois Statutes 122C9, to consider the purchase lease of real property for the use of the public body, 5 Illinois Statutes 122C5, or to consider pending litigation, 5 Illinois Statutes 122C11.
I'll second it.
Lang?
Aye.
Mencia?
Aye.
Petrielli, aye. Reed?
Aye.
Sager?
Aye.
And Schumacher?
Aye.
Espino is absent, and the motion passes.
thank you, everyone.